Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe and turn on notifications. Samuel believed that a real life shared between two people, was built on the small things, the invisible gestures. A coffee mug left on the counter for him in the morning, still warm. Quick, meaningless text messages in the middle of the afternoon. A simple, "I'm home," called out from the front door, cutting through the silence of the house. To him, these were not just habits. They were the mortar, the invisible glue that held the bricks of a marriage together. He and Catherine had been married for 6 years. She was a nurse at Portland General, 33 years old, with a quiet competence that he had always admired. He'd always respected her work, the night shifts, the last-minute calls to cover for a colleague. Healthcare was unpredictable. It was a world of emergencies that didn't run on a 9-to-5 clock, and he understood that. He had to. Samuel himself worked as a diagnostic imaging specialist. He spent his days in the sterile, humming basements of clinics and hospitals all over the city, calibrating the massive MRI and CT machines that peered inside the human body. He knew the rhythm of the medical field, the long hours, the sudden demands. He never saw a reason to be suspicious. Not once. That Thursday in October, the rain was tapping a gentle rhythm against the living room window. Samuel was on the couch, half watching a replay of a baseball game, the low murmur of the commentators filling the room. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He picked it up. A message from Catherine. "Don't wait up for dinner. On shift tonight. Kiss." He stared at the screen for a few seconds longer than he should have. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type back his usual response. He settled on a simple heart emoji and tossed the phone back onto the cushion beside him. He turned his attention back to the TV. But the game was just noise now. Something felt off. A small, dissonant note in the familiar melody of their life. Catherine never worked on Thursdays. Her schedule was as fixed as the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 7 in the morning to 7 at night. 12-hour shifts that left her drained but fulfilled. Thursday and Friday were her days off. Their days. She had always guarded that routine fiercely so they could have their weekends together, free and clear. Samuel tried to push the feeling away. It was a stone in his shoe, a tiny, nagging discomfort he couldn't quite shake. He told himself he was being ridiculous. A staffing emergency. That's all it was. It had to be. But the feeling lingered. He picked up his phone again. This time, his fingers moved with a sense of purpose he didn't quite understand. He opened their shared banking app, an act that felt vaguely shameful, like reading a private diary. He scrolled through the recent transactions. Groceries, the pharmacy, the gas station. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing at all. Until his eyes landed on a charge from 2 days earlier. A purchase from a store called La Perle Noire, $180. Samuel frowned, a deep line forming between his brows. He knew the store. It was a high-end lingerie boutique downtown, with delicate, expensive things displayed on mannequins in the window. Catherine never bought things like that. Ever. She was practical. She preferred comfort over lace, function over form. She'd often said that spending a fortune on something no one was going to see was a waste of money. In 6 years of marriage, he could count on one hand the number of times he'd seen her in anything more elaborate than simple cotton. And now, suddenly, this. He closed the app, the phone screen going dark. The reflection that stared back at him was that of a man he didn't recognize. A man with doubt etched into the corners of his eyes. He turned off the television. The room plunged into a thick, unnerving silence, broken only by the sound of the rain. He just sat there, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He was being paranoid. He had to be. But the stone in his shoe had just become a shard of glass. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a gift for a friend's bachelorette party. Maybe she just wanted to feel good about herself, a private little indulgence. But the explanation felt thin, hollow, especially when paired with the last-minute shift on a Thursday night. The two facts sat uncomfortably beside each other in his mind, refusing to connect in any innocent way. He stood up and walked to the kitchen, the familiar wooden floorboards creaking under his weight. He opened the refrigerator, stared blankly at its contents, and then closed it without taking anything. His mind was working now, sifting through the past few weeks, looking for something. He didn't know what, but small details, previously insignificant, began to surface, rising from the depths of his memory like debris after a shipwreck. Details that, on their own, meant nothing, but together, Together, they started to form a pattern. Catherine had switched her perfume about a month ago. Her usual light, floral scent was gone, replaced by something heavier, woodier, sandalwood and something else, something dark and sensual that he didn't recognize. When he'd mentioned it, she'd just shrugged and said, "Felt like a change." She had started getting her nails done, not just for special occasions, but every 2 weeks, manicured and polished in deep reds and burgundies. She had started packing a lunch for work. For years, she ate in the hospital cafeteria with her friends, but recently, she'd insisted on bringing her own food, claiming she was trying to save money. But the charge from La Perle Noire for $180 mocked that excuse. And then there was the phone. Her phone, which used to lie face up on the counter or the nightstand, was now always placed face down. A small, deliberate gesture, a shield, something she had never done before. He had noticed all these things, of course, but he'd filed them away under the category of life. People change, habits evolve. He had accepted her explanations without a second thought, because he trusted her. Samuel shook his head, trying to physically dislodge the thoughts. He didn't want to be that kind of husband, the jealous, suspicious type who saw betrayal in every shadow. The kind of man he'd always pitied. He went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. He tossed and turned, the pillow hot and suffocating against his cheek. Every creak of the house, every distant siren, sounded like an alarm. He saw her face in his mind, the way she smiled, the way she looked at him, or the way she used to look at him. When had that changed? When had the warmth in her eyes been replaced by a polite, distant coolness? He tried to pinpoint it. Was it a month ago? 2? He replayed their recent conversations. They were filled with logistics, bills to pay, errands to run, schedules to coordinate. But the connection, the real conversation, it was gone. He had blamed it on stress, on their demanding jobs. Now, he wasn't so sure. The alarm clock on his nightstand blared at 6 in the morning. Samuel was already awake. He had been for hours. The other side of the bed was empty, cold, undisturbed. Catherine hadn't come home. He reached for his phone, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. No messages, no missed calls. He tried calling her. It rang, and rang, and rang, until it went to her voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Catherine. Leave a message." The same cheerful, recorded greeting she'd had for years. It sounded like a mockery now. Samuel got out of bed. The floor was cold beneath his feet. He walked to the kitchen and made coffee, moving on autopilot. He stood there, staring at the steaming mug, the dark liquid swirling. But he didn't drink. He had a decision to make. He could sit here. He could wait. He could let the doubt and suspicion eat him alive, drowning in 1,000 imagined scenarios, each one more painful than the last. Or he could find out the truth. He picked up the landline from its cradle on the wall, his hand steady. He was going to find out the truth, right now. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, crisp and professional. "Good morning, Portland General Hospital. How can I help you?" Samuel took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain calm, even. The voice of a concerned husband, not a suspicious one. "Good morning. I'd like to confirm if Nurse Catherine is on shift today. I'm family and need to pass along some urgent information." There was a pause. The soft, distant click of a keyboard as the receptionist checked the system. "1 moment, please." The moment stretched into an eternity. Samuel gripped the phone receiver so tightly his knuckles ached. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. He could hear his own blood rushing in his ears. He focused on the sound of the rain outside, anything to keep his mind from screaming, "Please be there. Please just be a misunderstanding." The receptionist's voice came back on the line, clear and matter-of-fact. "Sir, I've checked the schedule for the week. Nurse Catherine is not scheduled for any shifts. Her rotation is Monday through Wednesday, 7 to 7. The words hung in the air. Thursday and Friday are her days off. Samuel felt the air leave his lungs in a silent rush. The kitchen seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't anger that hit him first. It was a profound, hollow emptiness. A void where 6 years of trust used to be. He thanked her in a neutral tone and hung up the phone. He stood there for a few seconds, the receiver still cold in his hand, processing the information. She had lied. There was no shift. There never had been. The casual text message from last night replayed in his mind, but now the words were laced with poison. "On shift tonight. Kiss." A bitter, Painful anger began to rise in his throat, choking him. He grabbed his car keys from the hook by the door, put on his jacket, and walked out into the gray, drizzling morning. He didn't have a clear plan, just a certainty. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He drove to the hospital. He parked across the street, in a spot that gave him a clear view of the main entrance. He knew Catherine's habits. When she worked, she always ate lunch in the hospital cafeteria between noon and 1. Always. He waited. The minutes crawled by. He watched doctors and nurses in scrubs come and go, their faces etched with the stress of the day. Noon came and went. Then 1 o'clock. 2 hours later, nothing. She wasn't there. He called her cell phone again. Straight to voicemail. He took a deep breath, trying to think clearly, trying to push through the fog of pain and anger. If she wasn't at the hospital, where was she? A desperate, hopeful thought flickered in his mind. Her mother. Her mother lived 20 minutes away. Maybe there was a family matter. A crisis. Maybe she had made up the shift excuse so he wouldn't worry. It was a weak possibility. A flimsy life raft in a sea of betrayal. But he needed to check. He needed to eliminate every other possibility before accepting the one that was tearing him apart. He drove to his mother-in-law's house, a modest home in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. When he arrived, Helen was in the front yard, watering her potted ferns. She looked up, surprised to see him. "Samuel, what a nice surprise. Is everything okay?" He forced a smile that felt like a grimace. "Everything's fine, Helen. Is Catherine here?" His mother-in-law frowned, a look of genuine confusion on her face. "Catherine? No, dear, she hasn't been by in about 3 weeks. Why? Did something happen?" "No, nothing," Samuel said, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. "Just thought she might be here." "Thanks, Helen." He left before she could ask any more questions, the image of her concerned face burning in his memory. Back in the car, his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. His head ached. His breathing was shallow. Every weak possibility had been exhausted. There was only one truth left, waiting for him. And then he remembered something. 2 years ago, after Catherine had been followed by a stranger on her way home from a late shift, they had installed a shared location tracking app on their phones. For safety, for peace of mind. He had never used it, not once. He trusted her completely. The app was just a digital safety net he never thought they would need. But now, with trembling fingers, he opened the app. It was still active. The map loaded. A small, blue dot pulsed on the screen. It showed Catherine's location. She was in a residential neighborhood 15 minutes away. An area of new, expensive home. Nowhere near the hospital. Nowhere near her mother's house. Nowhere she had any reason to be. Samuel pulled out of the driveway, driving on autopilot. His vision was blurred by adrenaline and unshed tears. He followed the coordinates on the screen, a silent, digital guide leading him toward the destruction of his world. He reached the neighborhood. The streets were wide and quiet, lined with perfectly manicured lawns and modern homes with clean, architectural lines. It felt like a different world. He followed the coordinates. He turned onto a side street, and then he saw it. Catherine's gray sedan, parked in front of a 2-story house with a well-kept garden. It was just a car, steel and glass. But seeing it there, in that alien place, felt like a physical blow. Samuel parked a few houses down, under the shade of a large oak tree. He turned off the engine, and the silence in his car was absolute. He just sat there, watching. His heart was pounding so hard against his ribs, it felt like it might burst out of his chest. Half an hour dragged by like an eternity. He kept his eyes fixed on the house, on her car, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His mind was a maelstrom of denial, anger, and grief. Who lived there? A friend he didn't know about? A secret relative? The lies he told himself were getting more desperate, more pathetic. Then, the front door of the house opened. Catherine came out, but she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a tall man in a well-tailored gray suit, his dark hair slicked back. Samuel recognized him immediately. Dr. Alistair Finch, head of the emergency department at Portland General, married, with 3 kids. A man who was always praised as a model professional, the kind who gave talks on medical ethics and leadership. They were standing close, chatting. Catherine laughed at something he said. It was a loose, intimate laugh, a sound of pure, uninhibited joy, a laugh completely different from the tired, cold tone she had used with Samuel in recent months. It was a laugh he realized was not meant for him anymore. When Catherine turned to head to her car, Alistair placed a hand on her waist. He pulled her back gently and kissed her on the cheek. It wasn't a friendly peck. He lingered. His lips stayed against her skin for a moment too long, a gesture of ownership, of intimacy that was unmistakable. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. She reached up and touched his face for a fleeting second, then got into her car. Samuel gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles turned white. His breath came out in a heavy, ragged sigh that was half anger, half sob. He wanted to get out. He wanted to slam his fist on the hood of Alistair's expensive car. He wanted to confront them, to yell, to demand answers. But something held him back. It wasn't fear. It was strategy. A cold, clear thought cut through the red haze of his rage. If I make a scene right here, without solid proof, she can come up with any excuse. She'll say they're just colleagues. That I'm overreacting, that it was all innocent. She'll turn it around and make me the villain. The paranoid, controlling husband. He needed more. He needed something she couldn't deny, something she couldn't twist. So he waited. He waited for Catherine to drive away, her car disappearing around the corner. He wrote down the address of the house on a napkin from his glove compartment, and he drove home, making sure to get there before she did. He walked straight to his home office. The house felt tainted now, every familiar object a reminder of a life that was a lie. He opened his computer. He synced it to Catherine's email and cloud accounts. She'd always been careless with passwords, using the same combination of their anniversary and her pet's name everywhere, a fact he'd once found endearing. Now, it was a weapon. He had never invaded her privacy before. He had never even been tempted. But this was different. This wasn't marriage anymore. This was an investigation. He logged into her email. He went straight to the deleted messages folder. The trash bin. People always forgot the trash. And there it all was. Dozens of messages between Catherine and Alistair. Intimate conversations. Plans for secret meetings. Affectionate phrases that made his stomach churn. Photos he chose not to open. Messages going back months. This affair wasn't recent. It wasn't a mistake. It was systematic. Planned. Careful. A second life she had built in the shadows of their marriage. Samuel saved everything. Every message, every photo, every single piece of evidence. He dragged them onto a flash drive, his movements methodical and precise. Then he took a deep breath. He printed out the most damning of the messages. And he waited. The calm that settled over him was the most terrifying feeling he had ever known. Catherine got home around 9 that night. She walked in acting the part she had chosen, playing the role of the exhausted, dedicated nurse. She tossed her bag on the couch and let out a long, theatrical sigh. "What a day," she said, running a hand through her hair. Samuel was sitting at the kitchen table. A single, plain brown envelope lay in front of him. He watched her in silence, his expression unreadable. "Tough shift?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost indifferent. She didn't notice the danger. She walked to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. "Exhausting. Barely had time to eat lunch." The ER was packed. Samuel nodded slowly. "I get it. Must be hard working so much." She took a long sip of water, finally eyeing him with a hint of suspicion. "Are you okay? You seem off." "I'm fine," he said. He opened the envelope. He began to lay the printed copies of her messages across the table, one by one. Page after page of black and white text. Her words. His words. Catherine froze. The water bottle was suspended in midair. The color drained from her face. "Funny," Samuel said, his voice still calm but now edged with an icy sharpness that made the air in the room feel thin. "Because from what I can see here, you weren't in the ER. You had a perfectly good lunch at Dr. Alistair Finch's house." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Actually, it wasn't even lunch, was it? It was more like a long, private date." "Oh." Her face, which had been pale, was now as white as chalk. She set the bottle down on the counter with a thud, her hands trembling. "Samuel, I can explain." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. It was a horrible sound. "Explain what, Catherine? Explain the messages you've been exchanging for months? Explain the I love yous you've been sending him? Or explain the $180 lingerie you bought to wear for him?" She tried to move closer, her hands reaching out for him as if to placate a wild animal. "It was a mistake. I was confused. I felt alone." That was the word that broke his calm. Alone? He slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed in the silent kitchen, making her flinch and step back. Alone? He repeated, his voice rising. I was always here. Always. I gave you attention. I gave you respect. I gave you my trust. And you? You gave me lies. Catherine started to cry. Thick, messy tears streamed down her face. It was a desperate, ugly sound. I didn't mean for it to happen. He gave me attention when I needed it most. You were always working, always tired, always. Don't. Samuel cut her off, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Don't you dare blame your betrayal on me. I worked to support this home, to pay the bills you racked up, to give you the life you wanted, and you repaid me by sleeping with your boss. She sobbed, sinking to her knees on the kitchen floor. Please, Samuel, we can get through this. We can go to therapy. We can rebuild. I still love you. Oh. He looked down at her, a crumpled figure on the floor, and felt a bitter mix of pity and contempt. You love me? You have a very interesting way of showing love. Must be the kind that includes sleeping with another man while your husband waits for you at home. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away as if her touch would burn him. I've already made my decision, he said. And just so you know, Dr. Finch's wife got copies of all of this afternoon. Oh. Catherine's eyes widened, her crying stopping for a split second in sheer shock. You didn't. Samuel pulled out his phone and showed her the sent email. The evidence of his calculated revenge. I did. And I also sent everything to the hospital's ethics committee. Breach of professional conduct. Inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. I imagine Dr. Finch will have a lot of explaining to do in the coming days. She scrambled to her feet, desperate now. You ruined his career. You had no right. The last thread of his composure snapped. He stepped toward her, his eyes locking with hers. I had no right? He hissed. He had no right to destroy my marriage. You had no right to betray me. But you did. So now you can deal with the consequences. She tried to argue, her words devolving into a frantic stream of accusations, calling him cruel, saying he was overreacting. But Samuel had already grabbed his keys. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. I'll come back tomorrow for my things. He paused at the door. I want you out of this house by the end of the week. The house is in my name. It was bought with my money before we were married. You're not entitled to anything. She collapsed to the floor again, her pleas and sobs echoing behind him. But Samuel walked out the door without looking back. He left her alone with the weight of her choices, surrounded by the paper evidence of her betrayal. The storm had broken, and he was walking out of the wreckage. In the days that followed, the story exploded. Alistair Finch's wife, Patricia, was a well-known attorney in Portland. She was not the kind of woman to suffer in silence. She didn't just file for divorce. She went public. On social media, she exposed everything. She posted the messages. She posted a full timeline of the affair. Alistair's pristine reputation, built over decades, crumbled in 48 hours. Samuel watched it all from a distance, a detached observer in a sterile hotel room. He saw the news articles online. He heard the whispers from former colleagues who called to check on him. Colleagues who once admired Dr. Finch now avoided him in the hallways. Patients requested to be transferred to other doctors. The hospital's ethics committee launched a formal investigation. 2 weeks later, Alistair was suspended from his position as department head. The humiliation was public, complete, and devastating. Catherine didn't escape unscathed. The hospital staff, who had already suspected something between her and Alistair, now had confirmation. The glances in the hallways turned to glares. Conversation stopped when she approached. The director of nursing called her in for a formal talk. Though she hadn't technically broken any explicit rules, her position was untenable. She was asked to resign, with the promise of a neutral letter of recommendation if she left quietly. She accepted, defeated. She lost her job, her reputation, and her husband in the span of a month. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, far from everyone and everything she knew. Samuel, meanwhile, moved forward with cold determination. He sold the house they had shared. He couldn't bear to step foot in it again. Every room held a memory that was now tainted, a ghost of a life that had never been real. He bought a smaller apartment in a new, modern neighborhood with no history, no memories attached. He focused on work. He took on more projects, expanded his client base, and poured all his energy into the precise, logical world of medical machinery. It was a world that made sense. A few months later, at a medical equipment trade show in Seattle, he met a woman named Sophia. She was a sales representative for a hospital tech company. She was direct, intelligent, and had a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She carried no heavy emotional baggage. They started talking about work, about life. They met up for coffee, then dinner, and Samuel realized, slowly, that it was possible to start over without dragging the past behind him. 6 months after the confrontation, he ran into Catherine. It was by chance, outside a downtown coffee shop. She looked different, thinner, her face was tired, and the confident light in her eyes had been dimmed. She was carrying a single grocery bag and seemed smaller, hunched, as if the world had stripped her of all her former assurance. When their eyes met, she stopped, hesitated. Samuel stopped too, his expression neutral. "Hi, Samuel," she said, her voice low, almost shy. "Hi, Catherine," he replied, without emotion. An awkward, heavy silence settled between them, filled with everything left unsaid. She took a hesitant step forward. "Marcus, I wanted to apologize. Really. I ruined everything, I know that, and I." He raised a hand, gently cutting her off. "You don't need to apologize. What's done is done. I've already moved on." She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. "I know, I just wanted you to know I regret it. Every single day." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. There was no anger left in him, no bitterness, just a distant, quiet calm. "Catherine, I learned something these past few months," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I learned that trust is like glass. Once it breaks, you can try to glue the pieces back together, but the cracks will always be there. Always. And I don't want to spend my life staring at those cracks." Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now. "I understand. I lost everything, Samuel. My job, the house, you, everything." A took a deep breath. "You didn't lose it," he said, the final, cold truth landing between them. "You chose it. Every lie, every secret meeting, every deleted message. It was all your choice. And choices have consequences." He stepped to the side, ready to walk away. "Take care of yourself, Catherine." And he left. She stood on the sidewalk, watching the man who once loved her more than anything in the world walk away without looking back even once. She understood now. Alistair, the source of the cheap thrills that had cost her everything, had vanished from her life, moving to another state to try and rebuild a career that would never shine the same way again. Samuel, on the other hand, had found a peace he hadn't expected. It wasn't a euphoric, happy ever after peace. It was a quiet, solid peace. The pain had left scars he would probably carry for years, but he had learned that rebuilding is possible. That betrayal doesn't define who you are. It only reveals who the other person truly was. He married Sophia 2 years later. The ceremony was simple and intimate, held in a small garden with just close friends and family. When they exchanged vows, Samuel felt something he hadn't felt with Catherine in the final years of their marriage. Certainty. The certainty that he was standing beside someone who valued him, who respected him, and who understood the profound weight of a promise. He had learned the hardest lesson life can teach. That love isn't enough without respect. That a marriage is built on small, daily acts of honesty, and when those are replaced with lies, everything collapses. He learned that the greatest revenge isn't anger or public exposure. It's simply moving forward, building a better life, and letting other people's mistakes echo in their own empty room. Because in the end, everyone reaps exactly what they sow, and Samuel, who could have been destroyed, had chosen to rebuild. Stronger, wiser, and in that rebuilding, he found something Catherine had never been able to give him: true peace. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next.